I'd like to start by introducing Allison Toller, the Chief of Brand Strategy and Partnerships at Mount Vernon. She's amazing. She looks nothing like this. But I was a history major many moons ago. And it's interesting, I think so many people, when they think of Chief of Brand Strategy, that it's the brand czar. And I actually have some marketing communications people at schools who kind of almost proudly say, oh, I'm the brand czar. And think back to your history classes. Has anybody ever loved a czar? Is there like, oh, he's such a warm and snuggly czar? Like, nobody loves a czar. You don't want to be the czar. The czar is all about command and control. I'm the boss of you. I'm going to tell you what to do. That is not, nobody wants to do that, and nobody wants to have that done to them. So I think of Allison a lot more like this. She would never put this slide in here, but I can. That really what a brand strategist should be doing is creating experiences, or at least trying to create experiences that are very intentional and are made to kind of give a glimpse into who your school really is, who it's really for, what it really does, and then kind of move people along. You think about Walt Disney was not involved in every single ride or every single feature that happens at Disney World or Disneyland, but he definitely wanted everybody to feel a certain way. So she does that.
You are too kind. Too kind. I would say it's really the team, and I'll get to that later.
Yeah, I'm not really that kind. And I love this quote actually from another Disney person, that a brand is not a thing. It's not, I think most schools these days know a brand's not just your logo or your tagline or your color palette or your font palette or whatever the heck, insert brand stuff here. A brand is really just a million little tiny gestures that either add up to something positive or detract for something positive. There's no neutral in brand world. So how do we create all of those experiences, those little tiny experiences, without having a brand czar? So my name is Tiffany Hendryx. I am a Mount Vernon mom. We'll talk about my mom experience first. These are my two girls on the first day of class this year. It's very early, and they're still smiling and terrifyingly old looking when I look at them like that. I'm not going to look at that. So I've got a 6th grader, Fiona, 4th grader, Piper. This is the beginning of our 3rd year at Mount Vernon. In a lot of ways, we're a very typical family. We live in now you can laugh, you guys are all Southern, I guess. So we can say we live in the best school district in Georgia, and you can kind of roll your eyes if you're from New Jersey or something, say, haha, Georgia. But still, we live in the best school district in Georgia. We bought that house specifically for the schools. You've probably heard this from a lot of your parents as well. I had the light kind of go out of my older daughter's eyes. She had been in her public school for about 3 years, her elementary school, and she was just, I don't know if I can say she was getting dumber. She was getting sadder. The school was literally spitting distance from our house, and I had to drag them out of bed every morning. It was heartbreaking. And I saw her, my oldest, especially Fiona, just realizing she's very bright, not the hardest worker. I can do just what I need to do to make straight A's, not make waves. The teacher will love me. And that's what she was doing. I don't know about you guys, but in the world that I'm in, people who don't make waves, do just plenty good enough, aren't the most successful, or certainly not the happiest in life. And so that's not what I wanted for her. So I started kind of looking around. I heard about Mount Vernon through word of mouth, through one of my best friends. That's kind of where the typical story ends for my family. This is my morning experience. This is literally a shot from my car, and this is on a good day. I live in East Cobb, for those of you who live in Atlanta. If you know Mount Vernon, it's like 1.5 miles from here, maybe. On a good day, it maybe takes me, with zero traffic, 40 minutes, like on a Sunday. Sunday at 4 a.m. takes me maybe 40 minutes. That's not usually my experience. On a typical day, it takes about 55 minutes. If there's fog on the Chattahoochee, forget it. It's like hour plus. Coming the other way, God help me when my daughter's in soccer, it takes easy 1.5 hours to get home. And yet, I do it with a smile on my face. I pay for the privilege to do it. I talk about Mount Vernon all the time. So what is it that Mount Vernon did to me, did to my kids, that made me this way? This is my Piper practicing her recorder in the minivan. Not pleasant, but it's my reality. My other identity, though, is that I have been working in school brand strategy for about 15 years. So, and I have my own firm, and I work with schools all over the country, and I get to go fall in love with all different kinds of schools and see what makes them tick, why parents fall in love with that school, and then kind of help translate that to the world. So imagine for a minute my very surreal experience. When I'm going to show you a few of the experiences that I've had at Mount Vernon. So I'm a mom. I'm experiencing a parent-teacher conference as a mom. I'm experiencing, like a football game or a choir concert or whatever. And then there's this other part of me, this other identity that's watching the mom me going, why does she feel that way? Why do I feel that way? I overthink things anyway. So it's this very surreal experience. And I thought it would be fun for us to kind of share from my dual parent and also brand strategy experience what happened to me, what's happened to my family, and why I evangelize about the school all over the place. And I kind of want to start with this question, because I don't hear this from school leaders. What's the deal with parents today? They're so weird. Most of us are them, right? And yet when we walk into the office, we're like, God, what's the deal with parents? Like we take off our parent hat and we're like, they're so demanding, and we've got not just hovering helicopter parents, but like stealth attack helicopter parents that come out of the blue, snowplow parents that want to remove all the obstacles from our kids' paths because he didn't really get much sleep last night and not a good breakfast, and so if you could just give him a little extra time on his math test and maybe actually just postpone it till next week, that would be really helpful. And we're all up in their business so that they never experience any discomfort. And my new favorite is the drone parent who monitors their children from afar through technology. This is like sort of brilliant or horrifying. I haven't decided yet because, like I said, I have a 6th grade daughter. But you can imagine through your iPhone, through all those little doodads that are on your car these days, parents know what's going on in their kids' lives through keystroke monitoring or net nanny and all kinds of crazy stuff from afar. I think one common theme, though, especially for Xer parents like me, is that we tend to be spreadsheet parents. Can you guys relate to that? Anybody have spreadsheet parents at your school? I think that's a very logical and healthy thing to be, personally, because I am one. We were the first generation to grow up having spreadsheets available to us our entire lives. We make decisions based on inputs. Let's put it all in and see what the answer is. What should we do? And so this is why you have parents who say, gosh, you offer 13 AP classes because they offer 14, and they're $100 a year cheaper, and they're 4 blocks closer to my house, but they have an extra 30,000 volumes in their library, and an extra 3 percentage points of their faculty have advanced degrees, so how do I calculate that? It's interesting that if you have a number assigned to something, parents will stick it in a spreadsheet. Even if it's not literally a spreadsheet, it's in their head, a spreadsheet. But I think it's sort of like, I'm on my second husband now, the right one, the one I should have married the first time. And after I got divorced, I swore, first of all, I would never get married again. But if I did, he was going to have all these traits. Or think about buying a house or a car. And it's going to have 5 bedrooms, it's going to be on a ½ acre, it's going to be in this school district, or you meet, the guy is going to be like this, he's going to be Mr. Right, and then you meet the real Mr. Right, or you find the real right house that only has 3 bedrooms, and it doesn't actually have a kitchen, but there's a place you could put a kitchen, and it'd be really cool, and the view is just stunning, and then you justify it. There's all that research that shows that we make emotional decisions and then justify it. Parents do the same thing, but in a vacuum, they're always going to revert back to a spreadsheet, which again, I still think is perfectly logical. So it's your job to some extent to help fill in that vacuum and help kind of foreshadow that emotional experience they're gonna have. When people ask me, what's the deal with parents today? It's the same deal as parents always. They only want 2 things. They want their kids to be happy, and they want their kids to be successful. I think most parents are not evil. There's probably some who are living through their kids or want to manipulate their kids. But I think all the parents that I get to know want their kids to be happy and successful. We just have very different definitions of what will make them happy or make them successful, or maybe even what is success. So you may have like the Upper East Side Manhattan parent who thinks that, like I'm pregnant. must start, applying to preschool so I can get into the right kindergarten, so I can get into the right lower school, yada, 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 right grad school, marry the right guy, get the right career, and then she'll be happy. So, there's all this kind of stress. This equation I found maybe 10 years ago from Pat Bassett, former president of NAIS, and it's my favorite, because he says, here's the value proposition for any school. It's very easy. My favorite word is perceived outcomes, and I think it's mostly outcomes these days when you have parents of younger kids or parents who are recovering from their own terrible educational experience. It tends to include experience more, like I really want my kid to be happy and love going to school, but then at some point I want them to be able to get into college and not move into my basement and all that. So perceived outcomes over perceived costs. You see the problem here. Perception is reality. You're not the boss, 100%, of perception, but you can influence it. What we want to do, though, is move our parents from buyers. And buyers, I would be very surprised if you guys aren't experiencing the fact that parents redecide every year, sometimes every semester. And you all have those parents who are like, well, I pay you, so you work for me. And what I need is this, 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 and this. They're buyers. They've been taught to behave like buyers, and when you don't offer the best value, they're going to go shop somewhere else. They know, or they think they know, what all the other schools are doing, and why don't you have a robotics lab, and why don't you have a hoo-ha, whatever. Going from a buyer to a believer, I'm a believer. I'm a Mount Vernon believer. It's going to take a lot for Mount Vernon. They're going to have to screw up big time, and more than once, like a lot. For me to go back to being a buyer, for me to rethink things, because they've earned my trust. The next question I get a lot was, how can we attract more of our best fit families? What's the latest cool social media trick? Or, how do we find them? How do we expand our zip code reach? How do we identify exactly who they are, the psychodemographics, so that we can target our best fit families? And I hate to tell you this, but there's no school on earth that has a best fit family. I'm totally not the average family at Mount Vernon. My kids don't really have sleepovers with the other kids because we live so far away. I don't have a lot in common with a lot of the moms, and that's fine. There's a lot of different kinds of best fit, especially in today's market, especially if you're in a tough market with a lot of competitors. Figuring out who your different kinds of fit are, not just your best fit, makes you a lot more sustainable and a lot more flexible in who you go after. It doesn't mean chasing the market. There are definitely not fits, but figuring out what are the through lines, what are the themes that all of your best fits families have, and then reaching those families where they are. We tend to think like you're either yay Mount Vernon or maybe Pace. I don't know. Maybe Holy Innocents. Meh. And it's not really like that. We're all on a spectrum somewhere. So I challenge you guys to think about, what are your types, not your type. There's a lot that we all know. There's the insanely college crazy parent. There is probably the Friday Night Lights parent. I would argue at Mount Vernon, there's probably, my best friend's kids go here, so it seems like a nice place for my kids to go. There's probably, it's the closest private. It's the closest private Christian. It's the innovative school. Do you guys have any of your parent types who choose you for a thing? It's the our kind of Catholic school. Anybody else? Why did your parents choose your school? So parents didn't have to go through that awkward choosing a school. Parents don't want, speaking of snowplow, we don't like to move our kids across divisions because it feels like that's going to be uncomfortable for them. Anyone else? The athletic school, lots of different kinds of sports. But it's interesting, there's lots of different kinds of, this is where our kids can play sports. This is where our kids can be like in the athletic powerhouse school, or this is where it's a no cut. Our kids can play. My kid can't tie his shoes, but man, he can play football. There's all different kinds of, this is where our kid can play sports too. I think the number one thing to keep in mind is that relevance is king. You need to know what it is that your parents value, back to that equation. Perceived outcomes, perceived experience. What is it that parents want? And figure out how you're relevant or not to that family, and then tailor your messaging for them. Obviously, you're going to have a lot of different kinds of messaging for different kinds of parents. Here's something from Mount Vernon from last year. They had these banners up on the high school campus, and it's their norms. I hate the word norms, but I love it when schools can name their norms. This basically just defines the Mount Vernon culture. I challenge all of you to name your culture in 5 little pithy phrases, because I work with schools all the time, and it's really, really hard. I chose Mount Vernon because of the second norm, fail up. Their 5 norms are: start with questions, fail up, share the well, assume the best, and have fun. I can tell you right now, they always do that. Parent-teacher conferences start with questions. They make it fun somehow, weirdly. They assume the best. They tell me the great things about my kids. Of course, I think my kids are great anyway. They are always sharing credit for all the work that they do. But I chose this school because Fiona needed to learn to fail in a safe place so she could really push herself and be her best and highest and happiest adult. That was a value of mine. It's a value of Mount Vernon's, but it's not the value of Mount Vernon's, but that's where they met me. So 2 weeks ago, I was in Montreal, and I had this epiphany. I don't know if you guys have traveled to Quebec. It's really fascinating how they greet you in any kind of situation, whether it's at customs or in a restaurant. So this is a restaurant in Montreal, and they will look you in the eye when you walk in, and they can't tell if you're an Anglophone or a Francophone, and so they say, bonsoir, hello. And however you respond, away they go, which is pathetic on a lot of levels for just America. But still, it's really makes you feel comfortable. You can walk into a French restaurant and not feel like I don't speak any French. And they say, bonjour, hello. Oh, so I say hello, you meet me where I'm at, and then you welcome me into a larger experience. If you had just stayed at bonjour, I would have walked away and felt really uncomfortable. So I think if you could just bonsoir, hello your way to all your parents, you're in great shape. I'm going to walk you through just quick how Mount Vernon bonsoired me. This was a picture that I took on my phone. You'll have to forgive the photo quality. These were all on my phone, and I'm no photographer. But this was at the open house that I went to as a favor to a friend who lives in Boston, by the way. I live in Atlanta. I work with schools. I didn't know Mount Vernon. How pathetic is that? And I found out about Mount Vernon from my best friend who lives in Boston. So they had this was first grade? Mm-hmm. First grade kids who did an empathy exercise and went down to a local bus stop and redesigned the bus stop so that they could be better for the people who have to sit. They sat out there. These kids are like suburban, affluent kids. They've never ridden on MARTA. So they have to go down there and interview the people who are riding the bus, and they then prototyped all these different kinds of bus stops. You can see the little ceiling fan there. I will admit there were quite a few of them who were made with wine corks. That was a signal to me that, okay, it's not that kind of Presbyterian school. That was affirming to me. You can read into that what you will. This was wonderful. Our carpool is insane. I'm sure carpool is probably insane. Schools are made or broken based on carpool, as you probably know, in relationship with their neighbors. When school starts, there's like a middle school path plus 1 grade of elementary school, and then there's this other path, and you break off. But if you're not an insider, you don't know which way to go. Think about the wayfinding at your school. I was at a school in Houston before that shared its school with a church, and I couldn't find the admissions office anywhere, and I felt like an idiot. Especially for a family that's new to independent school world, think about how uncomfortable they already are. It's like, if I don't play golf. If I went to a golf course and I tried to go, I don't know, what do you do, rent clubs, sign up? I don't know. I would feel really uncomfortable. Remind yourself what it feels like to be in a situation that feels very new, very, very uncomfortable, like you're an outsider, and try to anticipate all the different ways that parents could feel stupid, and then take care of those. No, this is the way you go. This is the way you go. I didn't choose Mount Vernon because it's the innovation school. I chose it because it's the failure school. They actually have that's terrible. Forget I said that. Oh my God, it's on film. Yeah. They actually have Failure of the Year award for faculty, which I think is the coolest thing ever. I talk about that all the time. But it's, I think in Atlanta in particular for a while there, it's got the innovation school image. Yeah, that was fine. But then I see the way they do innovation. Kids are having a blast. That's my daughter up in the upper left-hand corner, who won Best Use of Materials in her invention convention in second grade. That was so cool to see these kids making these crazy things at this invention convention, second graders. Mount Vernon has even, I think this Friday, they're having their Counsel on Innovation where I encourage all of you guys to do this. It's a great way to get local bigwigs and parents invited to your school, and then they have kind of a roundtable discussion and some learning that happens around a certain topic. This was the first year, and I was invited. It was so cool, and I had so many parents there and so many sort of Atlanta thought leaders going, oh my God, these kids are amazing. And they designed Thunk Us. We had high school students who we presented with a challenge. They interviewed us very respectfully. I would have hired any of them. It was amazing. At the end of the day, we just were all blown away. My daughter's fourth grade teacher says, or this is actually from her third grade, you are cared for, you are trusted, you are believed in, I will always assume the best. If at any time you do not feel this to be, see me immediately, love, Miss Rhett. Okay, I didn't choose this school because it's the squishy teacher school. I would do anything for Miss Rhett. She would do anything for my Piper. So this is the school kind of drawing me in to bigger and bigger understanding. Just they do a lot of visual learning. Everything's on the wall, so if you just happen to walk down the hall to pick your kid up for a dentist appointment, you can't help but see all the cool stuff that's going on that I wouldn't have otherwise known. This is from this year's head of school address. So there's this kid, holy cow, this kid's was working at Microsoft last summer. He's already coded all this stuff, and he's just talking about, here's what it's like to be a Mount Vernon high school student, and he's smarter than all of us put together. So you're like, wow, someday maybe my kid won't be him, but maybe she'll be friends with him. Maybe she'll date him. I don't know. Maybe he'll be nice to her. It just was like, this is who's at my kid's school. That's stunning to me. They're thinking about building a new high school. So they invited a lot of different parents and different audiences. This is a parent group to look at the model, the scale model, and then ask us to say, well, pick it apart. Tell us what's wrong with it. Tell us what's cool about it. Made us all feel like we had a voice. Whatever, upper school. I've got a fourth and a sixth grader. I think it'd be cool someday. But man, I'm super excited about it now, especially because that's my Piper right there. in the just little screen grab that they did, talking about, here's us getting ready for this high school. I did not choose this school because it's a Christian school or a Presbyterian school. I'm not Presbyterian. It was fine. There's all different flavors of all different kinds of denominations, and I didn't know what kind it was. Certainly not the reason I chose this school. My kids were going to get that aspect of their development somewhere else, and yet here's my daughter Fiona on the left side, who's now chaplain in student council. And so it's just expanded my understanding. Bonsoir. Hello. I think one thing that's been very helpful to me in getting to know what it is that parents really value is this exercise called the 5 Whys. And you could think about the Friday night, the athletic parent. I really want to choose your school, Franklin Road, because it's where my kids can play athletics, pre-K through 12. And you can say, oh, I know that parent. That's the crazy parent, the rah-rah, who just wants to live out their high school experience through their son, right? Not necessarily. Why is it that athletics are important to you? Well, because in my job, teamwork is really important. Well, why? What do you think about athletics that teaches you how to be a good team player? Oh, well, I had to learn that the hard way when I was in my 30s, and it was really awkward. But I was always an individual sports player, and I never really got to play with other people. So there may be that other parent who is kind of a crazy, Friday Night Lights parent. But asking, why is it that innovation matters to you? Is it because, well, I think Stanford will be more likely to accept my son? Or is it because, God, I was just such a stuck thinker, and it took me so many years, and I'm still not totally unstuck in my own job. I see how important that is. Or I just know my kid's so creative. I want them to be in a school that really embraces their creativity. There's lots of different reasons that on the surface look the same, But if you dig deep down, just ask parents. They're happy to tell you. What's their real rationale? Then you can find that values fit, the bone swap part. And then the last thing I'll leave you with, as far as how to get into the minds of your parents, we talked about this earlier, like, how Christian are you? These questions kill me. Like, how progressive are you? How excellent are you? How academic are you? How rigorous are you? How college prep are you? How accommodating are you? How 21st century are you? I mean, insert bizarre thing here. And instead reframing that to how are you innovative? I think Mount Vernon kind of got into a situation where it was everywhere. It was like, I joked with Brett about whenever I'd go to NEIS, it was like every bloody session he was there, you know? It was like, you know, everybody wanted to talk to Brett because it's the innovation school, innovation. Well, there's lots of innovating schools, especially in Atlanta. There's so many schools who are doing really amazing, innovative things. So what is it about Mount Vernon that really captured everybody's attention? Oh, well, it's the design thinking innovation school. Well, you know, so is Woodward, you know, so is Leavitt, so is Walker. You know, everybody does some kind of design thinking here. So it's not about how design thinking are you, how innovative are you, how are you using design thinking? Why? Asking the school, why? Why do you do it that way? And if you can somehow exemplify to your families, here's how we do Christian ed. Here's how we do athletics. Not how athletic are we, but how are we athletic? It's really powerful. And then the last question I get a lot is, so how do we, you know, we've got word of mouth marketing. We know that's important. How do we make it stronger? How do we make it better? So if relevance is king, I would argue that consistency is queen, and maybe even, I don't know, like a chess queen, more powerful in some ways. And consistency is really hard, especially if you're trying to avoid the brand SAR situation. And the older I get, the more I think the reason consistency is important, it's not just because we're going to hammer it home. And, you know, have you ever been to, I think it's Walgreens lately, that's Be Well? And you go get your prescription, they're like, here, be well. Nobody says that. That's just weird. You know, when some, like, you know, 25-year-old says, be well, it feels very big brother to me. And I have a lot of schools, and especially colleges, who spend tons of money on big brand campaigns, and they coach their admissions team to use their tagline all the time. If you want to have an uprising, a bloody uprising, give your faculty talking points. They love that. They love it when you tell them how to talk to parents. No, that's inauthentic. It's much more important, I think, to give them values, to give them norms. Here's how we do things here. I think that's the best definition of culture. Here's the way we do things. And then let them do whatever they want. Let them come up with stories. But the reason I think that that's so important, the consistency is so important, is because the other part of that equation is the costs. If we reduce the denominator, we increase the perceived value, right? So obviously there's the financial cost. I would argue that you could lower your tuition and probably reduce your value, ironically, depends on the market. But there's a lot of different costs. There's pain in the butt to get there cost, Exhibit A. There's social costs sometimes, like, really, you send your kid there? Why? Oh, I have to explain. There's opportunity cost. If I send my kid to Mount Vernon, I can't send them to Leavitt. But I think the biggest cost these days, back to spreadsheet parents and helicopter parents and snowplow and drone parents, is uncertainty. We are terrified of screwing up more than other generations. We are terrified. And we're so afraid of doing the wrong thing that we're oftentimes more likely to choose the safer looking option instead of the bolder option, because we just don't know really what to expect. So if you can help parents anticipate what the actual experience will look like, that will reduce that uncertainty. Turn off the wrong people, please. Your admissions office will thank you. And then turn on the right people and give them a little more confidence in what's about to come. My favorite analogy is a Mobius strip. My wedding ring is actually a Mobius strip, because the inside is the outside is the inside is the outside. It's sort of like what we do is what we say is what we do is what we say is what we do is what we say. You know, a lot of schools are very sort of proud of, we're a best kept secret. That's terrible. Why would you want to be a best kept secret? Or it's better than showing up and this place is terrible. I mean, it's better to show up and go, so much better than I thought it would be. But that's still terrible brand because that means people didn't know what to expect. So I thought it was going to be amazing. And I got there and it was amazing. Yes. So inside is your outside is your inside. Don't be afraid. Like Ian Simmons said yesterday, get real. Show your real self. Be a good school. Being an amazing school is the best marketing, best branding you can ever do, ever. This is just one example of consistency. You can't go anywhere on Mount Vernon's campus without some version of their, this is like a little synopsis of their mission statement in kind of bullet list form. It's everywhere, but not in a creepy Big Brother Tsar Nicholas way, but in a way that says, yeah, this is why we're gathering here. Remember, this is why we're here for this parent meeting. This is why we're here for this basketball game. And with that.
So first of all, Tiffany was very kind. There's a story behind all of what she's saying. It didn't happen overnight. So I want to share some of how we at Mount Vernon rebranded ourselves and some of the history, but give you a little bit of sort of my belief and why I have stayed with the school as long as I have. Before I came to Mount Vernon, I worked in television. I was a news anchor. And I met my husband in TV, and we've been married 19 years, and we both got out of the business because it's so crazy. But I went back to school and earned a master's degree in education. And I went to teach, and so I taught in Cobb County. I was an English teacher. Then we had children, and I stayed home for a while. I went back to public education and brought two of my backgrounds, education and communications. I worked with the superintendent of schools in Cobb County. I was his chief of staff. And then I worked in Fulton County Schools as the communications director, which was a fire hose job. Craziness! It was putting out fires all day long. Mount Vernon came from the heavens. It truly came from the heavens. I had a former colleague who was at Mount Vernon who reached out to me of all places but on Facebook and said, my head of school needs to meet you. Just come meet him for coffee. Just come over down the street because we lived in Sandy Springs. And I wasn't looking to leave. I was happy, sort of, putting out fires. Hadn't really thought about leaving public education because in my heart, I believe I was doing good things for the greater good. And so I just took him up on his offer. And I had coffee with the head of school who had just started. He'd been there about a year. He hadn't moved the trash cans yet. And he was looking for someone to help him cascade message, but to sort of be the right hand, to be the eyes and ears, to think about all the things that we know we need to do as a school, and to sort of bring our communications strategy together. Because the school was known as a good school in Sandy Springs that had built a high school, and then the economy crashed. And so we had lots of challenges. And our head of school came in with a particular vision. An amazing vision that I'll share. But we were known as a good Presbyterian school. This is what I stand by, and this is what I think I've been able to bring to the school is the idea of story. I don't have a branding background. I don't have a degree in marketing or advertising. I have a degree in communications. I know how to tell story. And what I have found over the years, working in public education and now independent education, is story matters. People remember stories. It's the reason why People magazine is still pulled off the shelves and bought every day, because people like story. Well, yes, it's the stars and all the chaos that they are ensuing, but there are always stories in people about normal people, individuals inside. So this is what I still hold on to, and we try to do at Mount Vernon, is that we curate and we tell stories. So there's a little history that I want to share about Mount Vernon. Dr. Jacobson came in at a very pivotal time. It was time for a new strategic plan. It was time for reaccreditation. The school really didn't have a brand identity in the school, so we had the opportunity to press the reset button in a major way. But that also meant we had a lot of work ahead of us. And one of the things that was sort of a grounder for us was helping everyone understand the future of education, where we needed to go. We were a good school. We were doing the things that most independent schools do. But we didn't have a differentiator, and we weren't articulating how we needed to change education. And our head of school had a very bold vision. He believed that we, Mount Vernon, needed to be one of those leaders, that we needed to flip the model. And how were we going to do that? So starting with our strategic plan, it was very intentional. It was very collaborative. The entire community read Tony Wagner's book, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. I think he's come up with several books since then. But this book in particular helped us as a community, parents, teachers, students who read the book, in understanding what we needed to do to flip the model. And so from that experience, we created a new mission statement. We really believed that our mission statement needed to be understandable, 2 sentences, but really get to the heart of the kind of school that we wanted to be. So I'll just read it for you. We are a school of inquiry, innovation, and impact. Grounded in Christian values, we prepare all students to be college-ready, globally competitive, and engaged citizen leaders. It's common language. It, again, is another foundation point. All of our students know our mission statement. And what a lot of brand strategists will tell you, your mission statement can't be in your brand promise. It isn't our brand promise, but what it allows us to do is to tell stories from our mission statement all the time. And so there's consistency and relevance. And it helps our entire faculty and our parents know who we are. In addition to the mission statement, we created common language. As a faculty, we developed 6 core skill sets, competencies, that are similar to the 4 C's that everyone's familiar with. It's those 21st century skills. This is actually version 2.0 of our Mount Vernon Mind poster. The definitions of a creative thinker, solution seeker, ethical decision maker, communicator, collaborator, innovator were all crafted by our faculty, grassroots. It was not something that we just sat in a room, 3 of us, and said, let's define these terms. It was very organic and very intentional. Common language. You'll see these all over campus. And our teachers use them in different ways. Our elementary school, our lower school does a really great job on a monthly basis of recognizing students who exhibit these traits. In our middle school, we've created a way of informing parents how students are exhibiting these traits. Are we grading using these? No. But the way we look at formative and summative assessment is very pivotal with these skill sets. He's the reason why I went to Mount Vernon. He's extremely visionary. He's one of the hardest working people I've ever known. This is our head of school, Dr. Jacobson. But I want to share a letter with you because it really says a lot about the culture at our school, the common language, but also how you are treated as a faculty member. When we all showed up, this was about 3 years ago, for our in-service, our pre-planning, each of us had a letter addressed to us, and there were personal notes written at the bottom of the letter, but this is a letter that he wrote, and it set the tone. You have arrived at an extraordinary moment. We are not interested in red tape, fixed mindsets, low expectations, or blending in. We are interested in solution seekers, ethical decision makers, communicators, creative thinkers, collaborators, and innovators. We are building something exceptional here. We need the work of your hands, the wisdom of your mind, and the discernment of your heart.
Can I add something real quick?
Go ahead.
So 3 years ago is when I was looking at this school. This is one of my favorite tricks for schools to use, and not that Dr. Jacobson did it as a trick, but when as a parent or prospective parent you can peek behind the veil. This was public on his blog, but it was very low key, and he just talked about it in the context of a larger thing. And of course, like a type A parent that I am, I read everything that I could ever find about Mount Vernon. When I saw this behind the veil kind of peek into the school culture, that this is the way the head of school talks to his faculty, you can imagine that there were some faculty members who were probably nervous when they got this. It sounded a little terrifying. Some that were so jazzed. And to me, that was like, yeah, okay, all that public-facing speak is real, because that's how he's talking to his teachers. It was very affirming.
Thanks, Tiffany. And I'll tell you, it wasn't for everybody. We definitely had a shift in what happened inside our school from a employment standpoint. There are those people that decided this isn't the place for me. I think these skill sets are great, but I'm going to teach the core curriculum, and I just need to go somewhere where I feel a little more comfortable. There are those that we actually had to encourage to move on. So there was a cleaning of house of sorts, and it was a wild time to be in a school, to go through that. But at the same time, it was very affirming because the people that were attracted to our school are phenomenal. And not to say the ones that left aren't phenomenal, but they weren't phenomenal at where we are as a school and what we're trying to do. Okay? So the individuals that we attracted were amazing, and they were coming from all over the country. We've heard from teachers who are now already contacting us about the next school year because of the culture that we're setting. But I'll tell you, it's really hard work. I've never worked harder in my life. I worked in public education where you're always putting out fires and you're having to teach a set standard curriculum, and then you're evaluated on that curriculum. That's hard work, but creating something and building something and maintaining something is quite challenging, but very rewarding at the same time. So let me just show you then, how do you translate that to the outward? I think someone in here, perhaps from Brandon Hall, you mentioned, okay, you got the message internally. How do you cascade that externally? And again, I don't have an advertising background. I don't have a brand background. So of course, we hired people that know what they're doing. We did put some money in the game. We brought in a group that helped us rebrand the school, but spent time with us and interviewing our culture and understanding the real us so we could translate that. This was our first print ad that came out the same year we were reaccredited, the same year that we came out with our new strategic plan. And it's a snapshot from a very real moment in class. And we really felt strongly about that. We didn't want to have stage shots and just smiling children. And granted, we've got some smiling children here. But this was from a moment when she's presenting in class, and it was just, we want to have more of those moments. So in this brand statement, we're sharing some of that common language. We're a very different school. We're sharing the fact, though, that we have an open house and campus tours, so all that necessary information. And then how it progresses is this is where we are today. Trying to tighten the copy a little bit. We've become an innovative school, like Tiffany said. So how do you maintain that in such a way where it doesn't become stale? Yep, we know that. Maybe that's not for me. And so what we've decided to do, because we're at a pivotal time in our school, is not change the message of innovation necessarily, but be cognizant of the fact that we have a lot to do in the way of growing and fulfilling that growth. We're bursting at the seams as a school, so it's time for us to start raising money to build a new high school because our 7th and 8th graders are in a modular village of sorts. So taking our brand and advancing it has been the next challenge. And one way we've decided to do that is to remind people internally who are really going to be leaning on over the next couple of years why you're here. Why you, what makes you a Mustang? So I just wanted to share some of this with you to share that you can't necessarily stay stagnant, and we have bold aspirations for the future, and in a way to get there, we've identified a new way to sort of describe that. So instead of words like what Tiffany showed you of our mission statement, we're concentrating more now on faces and a celebration of sorts and more presence in our community to remind our families, because again, there are those families that you have to resell every year, why you're here and why this is the place for you and why we really need you to do more than just tuition over the next few years to build a very ambitious building. We even came up with a strategy statement. So our team works to do the following. We want to increase school spirit. We are not an athletic school, but there are a lot of families that want us to be athletic and more athletic. And we have 2 campuses. So we have across the street, preschool through grade 6, and then we have 7th through 12th across the street. How do we unify those campuses? So that is a big focus for us. And strategically, over the next couple of years, defining what it means to be a Mustang. Here's just a visual demonstration of what we've done this year on the campus. Again, more faces, more celebration, more defining what it means. We come out with a weekly newsletter, which is fun, but very challenging.
It's fantastic. Best
And
I've ever seen.
well, it's a lot of photos each week, but it's reminding people about the students and the faculty that make up our great community. I wanted to share with you too, though, that being the brand czar, there are many fail-up moments that I encounter, and that this is one of them. And these are nice, sort of. They were put up on the gym wall, and a parent, as we talked about parents, and we love their involvement, but a parent decided, let's do some life-size banners for the senior volleyball players. And she did them, and they just put them up, and one day I walked to the gym, and there they were, and they're okay, but they're not brand aligned. And so that, to me, this is sort of a fail-up moment, but you have a parent that is getting the fact that, hey, we're celebrating people. So you want to celebrate her involvement, but at the same time, there's a protocol and channels to go through. And so it's an honest moment here, a very honest moment, and this happens. At the end of the day, it's all about the people you surround yourself with. And at Mount Vernon, I am surrounded by amazing individuals, and this is our team, and this is collectively our philanthropy team and our partnerships team. So collectively, we work on raising money, but also communicating and managing volunteers. A lot of event planning comes out of our office, but this is from our retreat, and we go every summer for a couple of days and just strategize and collaborate together. And lastly, I wanted to share our brand and style guide, because while it is a team effort and while we do concentrate on story, we are very intentional about our brand elements. And so every year we sit down with faculty at the beginning of the year and we share the new version of the brand and style guide, so everyone feels informed and knows where to go if they need to utilize a logo or a certain color. But we make this available on our website.
Actually, we're not logged in right now. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So
But this will be on the SAIS.
Okay.
Whatever.
Right.
So you guys can actually link to it and get it yourself. I will say this: the thing that impresses me to no end, because there's a lot of brand czars out there who have brand style guides that are all about don't think before asking me first. Don't you do anything. This one is actually quite liberating. And if you know anything about Mount Vernon, I tease them all the time because they're never not on Twitter. They're never not like blogging somewhere, saying something. All of them, all the time, from the preschool teachers all the way up. But in this brand guide, there's nothing that says, come through me if you want to tweet something, or only tweet about these things. Remember to stay on brand, because they've baked it into the culture in such a way that says, like, if a parent comes to you with a wackadoo question, ask me. Or if something really crazy comes across the transom, ask me. But other than that, you guys just tweet your little hearts out, because there's that trust and respect relationship there, which is really impressive.
And I think we're just going to...
I want to close with this.
Sound?
So this is how a lot of people ask me, usually trustees, and I have an MBA, so I can sort of relate to this. We were talking yesterday about what's the ROI. I never don't hear that from trustees, and they have a right to ask because it's often quite expensive to do a brand program. On the other hand, it depends. Like, if you have one family that joins your school and stays for 12 years, that's worth a lot. If you have one family, like, I don't know if mine counts, because I evangelize like crazy, but I'm evangelizing in Los Angeles and Montreal. Like, I don't know if that really helps you guys, sorry. But I say one of the ways you can tell if what you're doing is really working, and language is so important in school world, words matter in school world more than anywhere else, is when your people start to use your language back to you, unbidden, and not in a creepy, be well kind of way, but in an authentic way. And so this is an example. This is my daughter Piper, who's in 4th grade, and during homecoming week, they have Spirit Week, and they have crazy sock day and crazy hat day, like I'm sure a lot of you guys do. And she couldn't find her hat from last year that we got at Goodwill that she really loved, and so she's like, oh, that's okay. This is so Mount Vernon. This is also so Piper. She's like, oh, but I see a box there. So she, I swear I had nothing to do with this, takes this box, sticks 6 pencils in it, tapes the heck out of it, and they have the 6 Mount Vernon mindsets on the top of them, on these little pencils, and I'm, of course, worried about them, like, lead poisoning her head or something. And it says, go homemade hats on the front, I heart Mustangs. On the back, it says, see ya, which is just hilarious. But the fact that she knew the 6 mindsets, she knows I'm here to become an innovator and a collaborator and an ethical decision maker, and she's known that since 2nd grade. Like I said, it's so awesome. A little, like this much weird, mostly just awesome. And I think as a mom who's investing in her, that right there sums it all up. It's not just even your parents talking your language back to you, but the kids get it. They get what they have as special. And that's all she wrote. That's why I'm a believer, not a buyer. And thank you for your time.